I'm Mario Martinez Jr., CEO and founder of Ingresso, and we are the creators of flymessage.io, the free personal writing assistant and text expander application. On each episode of this podcast, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you grow your sales numbers at scale. So, get your pen and paper or iPad and keyboard and start taking notes as you're now listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Modern Selling Podcast. And today, I'm rocking my 49ers. You got that right. But I've got a very special guest here with me, my friend, Mr. Doug C. Brown, CEO of Sales Strategies. And you know what we're going to be talking about? How to make it the top 1% sales folks who are doing amazingly well. And you know my background. I spent a lot of time in the President's Club, Diamond Club, Pinnacle Club, and the Over 100% Club. In my corporate career, 15 out of 18 years that I did that. And I can tell you exactly what happened in those 3 years that I didn't make it and tell you what was going on inside there. But Doug, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Mario. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm really grateful.
Very welcome and excited to have you. What a great topic we're going to be spending some time on for both sales leaders and sales reps as well, and business owners as well who want to, make it to the top. But before we begin, just do me a favor, buddy. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then I've got a very special question I want to ask you.
Okay. Well, professionally, I started working at the age of 3. I worked for my father's company, and I started sweeping floors for 25 cents a week. And by the time I was about 5.5, my dad pushed us out in front of clients and said, "Hey, go sell." Right. So we would go out and we'd sell, we'd write orders, and we'd, of course we had help from, it was a family business back then. So grandparents were there and things like that. And I remember the cool concept of leverage back then, right? Because I remember I was getting like maybe 50 cents an hour at that point. But then I'd take a part that we had, it was $3 and we'd sell it for $6. And so I'd sell like 5 of those and I'd be like, wow, I just, made 5 times 3 is $15. I'm working for 50 cents. How many hours do I got to work for that? Right. So it was kind of like, it started getting my little 5.5-year-old brain kind of twisting in the right direction. And then I worked with my dad for up until I was about 18 years old. Had sideline businesses. I started my first business, actually got a bank loan at 13. I persuaded my brother to take a I think it was a $1,300 business loan back then. And, that business was successful. And I always had these side businesses growing up, went into the military from there, came out of the military, wanted to get an education because that was back then, especially that was what you did. Got a couple college degrees and I was selling music equipment through my college years to a lot of the bands that, we all listen to on the radio even and today. And when I got out with my college degree, I realized something. I had degrees in biology, nuclear medicine, and others. And I realized I could make more money. I was making more money selling music equipment than I actually would have made in the hospitals. So that kind of drove me into a career of selling. So I was like, well, let me try this. And I got my first real sales job in corporate America, became the top rep out of 315. We grew that company up. I say we, because I was one of the first employees in there. And that company eventually sold off for $2 billion. And we collected our stock and moved on to the next thing and just been in selling ever since.
Fantastic. And now CEO Sales Strategies. Tell us a little bit about that and what you're doing with your own company.
Yeah, that came out of, actually, I helped a man named Chet Holmes and his company. So Chet wrote a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. I became Chet's president of training and sales as an independent. Then a small figure named Tony Robbins came along and wanted to buy in. Of course, I'm being facetious, but I ended up being Tony's president of training and sales with Chet for about 7 years. Then I helped a man named Russ Whitney on Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and a bunch of other big brands. As well as, we worked with Deepak Chopra, Brian Tracy, the E-Myth Company, CBS Television, Procter & Gamble, all those. And And what happened was I developed a process through that process where I took our internal sales teams and I had control over them because they asked me to be president of training and sales. And I was able to increase the close rate from 17.8% to 43.2% in the first 4 months. And so we started doing that. I took that same process, started outboarding it into other companies, and they were getting fantastic results, you know? And so that process grew into CEO sales strategies where we have a step by step by step by step process on how to get client acquisition going and revenue expansion on all levels, whether it's just through an individual salesperson, a solo entrepreneur, or major corporations. I've done it for all.
That's fabulous. And of course, as you know, Doug, as always at the beginning of my podcast, I ask all my guests very specifically something about them. Tell us something nobody knows about you, even if they're looking at any or all of your social profiles.
I I actually tried to grow hair.
Okay, tell me more. What does that mean?
So I literally tried hair transplants. I tried everything that is possible because when you're a young guy and you're losing your hair, you're like, oh my gosh, my life's over. And then I met my wife, and she's like, shave it off. And she said, I think I'd like that, and I did. And we've been blissfully happy. Not that we weren't before, but we are, continuing on. And the really weird part, Mario, on that whole thing for me was the day I shaved it off, I was sitting in a restaurant by myself, thank goodness. And three women came up and they touched my head and they were like rubbing my head. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And so I asked them, I said, what's up? And they said, a man who does this has high confidence, and that's sexy. So that's my little insider thing on hair.
So don't worry about the balding head. I've got the big bald spot going on in the back over here. Just eventually take it and love it. But the only difference between you, Doug, and me is that you've got looking like a normal size head. I've got the big Jay Leno face and head. So it may not look as good with a bald head like mine. Well, listen, let's get into some strategy discussion here and some topics. Everybody's, tuning in really to take some time to learn how to be able to get to that top 1%, whether you're a business owner or whether you're in a Fortune 500. So let's talk about the process of becoming a 1% earner. First off, how long does this journey take?
It depends on what level the person is at. I mean, from the beginner, like somebody who and I've done this, people have zero sales experience. About 2 years, quite frankly, of continuous study and application. For somebody that has got some sales experience, depending on whether or not they have, bad habits, if you will, habits that are preventing them from getting there. It generally takes I have found about 9-10 months, right in that area, to 2 years is the optimum time, because it's really about how do you think, act, and do like the 1% earners. And sometimes that thinking is what gets people more in a challenge mode than anything else, because we've got to kind of undo some of the unconscious or the habitual behaviors that they learned growing up that kept them safe through childhood and then in adulthood, even up to making, let's say they're making, 120,000 a year in sales. It's a different level of thought to get from $120,000 a year in sales to say 1.2 million in sales. And so we've got to work on those mind triggers and recondition that process. And that sometimes that's half the battle.
Very true. That is true. So can anyone become a top 1% earner?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, anybody who has the desire to do it, because, a lot of people think, well, geez, I'm very analytical, for example, and I say, well, look, I've done this with accountants, engineers, physicists, these are, mathematicians. These are very structured, very methodical people. I've had people say, well, I'm just not a people person. Well, you don't necessarily have to be a people person once you understand the process, which allows us to engage with people, and then we have outgoing people who go, oh, this would be a piece of cake. And sometimes they, they have to recondition the mind as well to do that. So the answer is yes. Anybody who has the desire, but with commitment, because this is going to challenge them on all kinds of levels. There is a 1%er for a reason. That's because the other 99% aren't there. And so we can't do what those people have been doing in order to get to the 1%. So the reality is that anyone who has the desire and commitment, and it doesn't matter with the education background, that's not an issue. I've had people who couldn't speak English language when they first started out, and then 2 years later they're knocking it out of the park. So it really doesn't matter based on what I know.
I love what you said. The top 1% are those that are not doing what the 99% are doing, or they're doing the things that the 99% are not willing to do. Yeah, absolutely. And that there's so much to unpack right there in terms of just my own personal experience, in terms of being a top performer and a top earner in all of the corporations that I worked for. And people often ask me, like, what was the secret to your success? And it was, I looked at the very best person in the sales organization, saw what they were doing, and said, how could I make it better? And then I turned around and I read, watched videos, practice, and I tried over and over and over again. And that's how I started being able to outperform those that were the best, set the benchmark and be able to go past that benchmark. But I'd love to get from you, I've got an idea of traits of the top 1% earners. And you kind of mentioned one of them. What are some of those traits that you see in those that are earning the top 1% versus the rest of the folks in the organization in sales?
I think it goes back to what you started saying. You would look at the top of the top. I would do the same thing. So if anybody wants to be more successful in any pursuit in selling, find the people who are doing exactly where you want to be and what they're doing at that level, and go take them out to lunch. Sit down. You'd be really shocked how many people will tell you exactly what they're doing. And a lot of times it comes down to process and model that they're doing. Of course, the mind is going to be a big part of this, but some of the traits are, like, if we look at, like, what does a producer do? Well, a producer is going to be somebody who's consistently prospecting. They're going to be consistently having communication and conversations of meaningful proportion. They're going to be following up, and they're going to be closing business. And that's usually what a producer does. Prospecting, consistent conversations, closes, and that's more your average producer out there, or even a top producer. But a 1%er is going to look at that just like you did and say, okay, how do I leverage this whole process, number one? And the traits are going to be, I am looking at not only having consistent prospecting, but I'm going to look to automate this consistent prospecting, because I know that the master prospector is going to outsell the master closer. I'm going to get meaningful but relevant communication, which means it's timely. They have a problem or an opportunity. They're going to look at conversational conversion, but they're going to look at all of this and say, okay, do I have a lead? Do I have a marketing qualified lead? Do I have a sales qualified lead? Do I have a sales ready lead? Or do I have a purchase order ready lead? And most of the time, they're only going to have conversations with the last two: sales ready leads and purchase order ready leads. So they have a system that's driving people up from a lead to a sales ready lead. And they have that more consistently going on. They're also using sales expansion. So they're thinking, I'm not selling once. How do I sell multiple times? How do I expand this sale? Upsell, downsell, cross-sell, internal expansion, external expansion, referrals, right? They're looking to expand this influence in the circle consistently. And they have massive ongoing follow-up that is relevant to the individual. And they get to know that buyer so well, so that the buyer trusts their decisions more than they actually trust their own decisions. Now, some of the traits in that are really going back to, you can take a top producer, right? Top producer is somebody who produces something at the top. an article of exchange. Then you have what I would call, you have your top producer, but then you have an overachiever. The overachiever is like, quota, what's that? Right. And that's baseline for average people. I'm not even thinking about that. Overachievers are going to consistently outdo themselves. Just like you said, Mario, you looked at that and then how do I raise it again? How do I raise it again? So you take the top producer profile, the overachiever profile, you smash them together and you have what I call an elite performer. And that is your 1% earner.
I love that. For those of you that have listened to my podcast, you know that I talk a lot about my early days. I started out in software sales at the age of 19, Doug, and I was paired off at the age of 20 after I went from a telemarketer, now called SDR, into a junior account executive role. Sorry, I was 21, excuse me. And at that point, when I was paired off with a gentleman by the name of Greg Wolf, he was the top producer in the company. And Greg and I worked side by side as a partnership. And so what would happen is we both prospect. And what he was looking for is he would be looking for someone who was a sales ready lead or ready to purchase. And what he wanted me to do was handle anybody else that was below the sales ready lead. And he would take the sales ready and the give me a quote conversations. And so I always thought, well, how do you know that it's a sales ready lead? And so that was the benefits when we used to work in offices where we had cubes right next to each other. And then you remember the old days, Doug, where we had the Y connector, you could plug into somebody else's little headset and listen to the conversations and hear what they're saying. So he would always, when we were prospecting, he would always ask me, he says, and I said, oh, this folks are ready. They're actually looking for a solution. And his question was, when are they looking for a solution? Okay. And then I would say 3 months out, 6 months out. And he said, okay, you follow up with them. But if they were saying, I'd like to have a conversation right now, we're in the middle of, then it would be, I'm going to take that lead because that's a sales ready. Then there were other times where they were so frustrated. This was EDI software. And they said, I'd like some pricing. And so he would say, I'll take those. And then anybody who said, yeah, would you send me some information? He'd hand it off to me. We would like to have a conversation, but follow up with me he would hand it off to me. So I started figuring out real quick the characteristics of a customer, a buying profile of a customer, and tuning in to, is this a ready to buy right now, a soon to buy, or a kick the tires type of prospect? And I started separating that. And sure enough, that year, we ended up as a combined team, ended up in the number one, set a company record for the most amount of sales ever done. $2.1 million at that time was what we sold in EDI for the AS400, Unix, and mainframe machine. So I really started listening into some of those things so that I could figure out how to identify a buying signals, if you would. And I would argue, and I love your opinion on this, that whether you're a business owner or whether you're a seller or a sales leader who's reviewing pipeline, what we're looking for is to identify the buying signals and the strength of those signals in order for us to identify where to focus our attention at. What do you think?
I agree 100%. So if I was to take it and just kind of dumb it down a little bit on the language, if you will, like bring it down a little bit, do we have a prospect or do we have a buyer? And so those buying signals are what tell you whether or not you have a prospect or a buyer. And, semantics, people go, well, what about suspects or whatever? It's like, stop this crazy language. It's either you have a human being who's either going to be able to buy from you or they're in the process of trying to buy from you. The process of trying to buy from you or thinking about, that's a prospect. A buyer is somebody who's capable of buying, has the authority to make the decision, has the money, has the checkbook. Now, I'm not saying they don't have to create budget at times. I'm saying this person is a true buyer. And a lot of times, Mario, which I heard, the gentleman you were talking about, he only worked with buyers. And anybody who wasn't a buyer, he just kind of pushed it downstream to you to kind of get them to move from the marketing qualified to the sales qualified to the sales ready side. and he worked with the buyers going forward. So it's a really great strategy. And if we think about, we're only going to prospect for buyers, and we're going to identify and we're going to disqualify them, which is what that gentleman did. He disqualified them from being able to talk at that point. We still got to have a system, because it doesn't mean they won't work their way into buyers. And he was using your labor and your talent and skills as the scrubbing mechanism to get them to that place where they were a buyer. And that's exactly what these people do over and over and over and over again. And then once you get the buyer, now how do you create more buyers out of that buyer, whether it's one-time purchase, now we want extended referrals or internal expansion within the company, or whether or not we are, increasing the buying frequency, get them to buy more from us, or just get larger amounts of sales in that one concept. And, that it works over and over and over. And you build great relationships with these buyers, and these buyers will come back to you again and again, because the buyers move from company to company, let's say, right? So that's the other trick that you learned early on, right? I got all these buyers in one, company, and then they start moving to other companies, and I start picking up new business because they moved to another company, which is external expansion.
Yes. And one other thing that I remembered early on in my days, I'd love your opinion on this. And then I want to get to, like, let's define what a top 1% earner is, or a top of 1%. What is a top 1% earner? One of the things that we did was, because we were we were hunting and farming. In that days, we didn't have separation of roles, right? There was no account manager and there was no account executive. You were farming within a territory, and you were growing within a territory as well. And if you grew the revenue, you would actually have a spiff on top of net new business. Yeah. So one of the things I remember he would do is, of the 5 days of the week, we would allocate out a minimum of 1 day to engagement with existing customers. Because what we're looking for is how to mine the existing customers, and then how to actually upsell or add on based upon data and analytics that we were getting from the software that indicated that they might need this or that or whatever it might have been. And so I always took that. And as I went in my career, I thought, all right, I need to be able to mine the existing customers, figure out how I can upsell, add more, or, this is what he taught me, get a referral. When you're talking to them, figure out a way for them to be able to say, hey, I know IT manager of, right? And be able to get that information. And so that's what I started implementing even in my own career, was allocated time towards existing customers. And then the rest of it was all about prospecting. And I think a lot of sellers miss that. By the way, the ratio was 1 to 4, 4 days of net new, 1 day of existing clients. And that was because what we were going after was the spiff on net new business.
Yeah. And that makes total sense in order to do that, because if we think about referrals, if they're done correctly, referrals are they're certainly sales qualified leads, but they're generally sales ready leads. And this is why referrals close at such a high close rate. Now, so we look at a referral, like, there's different levels of referral. We could just get somebody who gives us a name and says, call this person and use my name, right? That's kind of a level 1, if you will. Those are going to close 1 in 5, 1 in 4 type thing. Or then we got somebody that says, hey, I'll send an email out for you. You're going to have a better percentage of close rate connecting. Then you're going to have the person that says, hey, I'll make a phone call for you. You're going to have a higher percentage of close usually with that person, because they're talking and get to ask questions. But the ultimate is the person who says, listen, let me pick the phone up, call, and I'll put you on the call with me, and I'll do a warm introduction, right? Those are going to close 70% of the time, if it's a qualified need, like if they have a need or an opportunity that they're looking for, some type of problem or whatever. So when we're expanding this through referrals, it's extremely important. And I love the fact that you segmented time to actually do the business, because one of the little tricks that, when I was doing a lot of consulting, I would just go back and, number one, when you're a consultant, they pay you pretty well. And so when you go into the company, you got to prove your ROI, return on investment, really fast in order for them to keep their eyebrows raised up. Otherwise, it's like, oh, this guy's an expense on our books. One of the things I used to do is I just go look at their dormant client base. How long have they not re-engaged their client base? And so what would we do? Get all the reps to start going back to the existing client base, and we get new sales immediately. It's always there. And, they think I'm a genius because, the reps by nature, what a rep will generally do, especially an average or even a top producing rep, they will only engage that person once. They might talk to them once a year here and there if they're lucky. And the reality is there's lots of new business that's there. And the fact is, with referrals, just like you're talking about, if we do this right, they'll call us when they have referrals. If we build the relationships up over and over, so you're spending that time getting the initial ones, but if we have a active referral system, then we have people who are actually calling us. And so that is like the ultimate of the ultimate. Like I just had this happen to me. My friend Michael called me up and he's like, look, I think I have 2 clients for you. I'm like, great. He said, I've already talked to him. I've already built him up. You're the king of the hill. Don't worry about it. Just give him a call. And I called them both and they both closed on the first call. Right. And there's no like, and when you're set up like that in a sales process, you're already the expert. So the objections are far less and your close rate is far higher. And you usually in say consulting or coaching or something like that, you can get higher dollar value, which means you have more value that you're providing than they perceive. And they will usually pay more for your product or service, really, no matter what industry it is, because you're positioned as the expert. So I love what you did there. I love the fact that you segmented it. And that is what a 1% producer will do.
Great points. It's funny you mentioned that. I'll tell you a story. So recently, I had somebody that was doing contracting work for us at Bangresso, and they charged us, let's just say, $100 per hour, right, for the contracting work that they were doing. And I asked them, I said, hey, I just talked to another CEO and they had a need and for your services. And I said, oh, I've got the best. You got to talk to this person. Would you mind if I introduce you? And they were like, absolutely. And I was like, by the way, they asked me what the going rate was. And I said something like 140, 150 bucks an hour. And so they said, oh, okay, well, yeah, introduce me. And so I said, what is your rate? And they said, oh, I'm doing maybe like $115, $120. And I was like, that's too low. And they said, well, that's kind of like the going rate. I said, but I just referred you. They came to me and they said, who do you know? I'm in need of a big service. I really, really got to have this. I need the best of the best. And I've already wasted $10,000 on this person, that person, this person, that person. They're like, okay. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to tell them that your rate is 165, 170, not the 150. And I told them, I think I'll let you know. And they're like, okay. So I went back and I said, listen, I've got this individual. Greatest thing ever. They're $175. Now that was 25 bucks more than the 150 that I had already quoted them, right? $175. I don't want to introduce you unless you're super serious about paying this rate because they're extremely busy and I'm not going to sacrifice my work for yours. Now here I am selling for them. And so he says, please introduce me. I say introduce. I put the information on the email so they all have the same information. And she takes it away and she turns around and tells me, she's like, I've never been paid that much money ever for any client. Thank you very much. And I was like, what you missed was the fact that this was a warm referral, right? And this is a fellow CEO telling another CEO, here's how you solve this problem. And I got just the right person to solve that. Like now, there is no selling time. One call close. You tell them what you're doing, how you're going to do it, and it's done. And the contractor was like, oh my God, this is great. And I was like, go back to all your customers and ask for that referral, that warm referral for someone who has a problem, and make sure that your pricing is just a little bit higher than normal.
Well, I love it because the thing is you position them as an expert. And when we are going to go buy from an expert, we expect to pay premium. It's not like no one, the old saying is, no one would go to a company and go to their boss and go, boss, I just hired the cheapest budget rate consultant we could get on the planet, right? They won't do that, right? In the old days, they would go, we hired IBM. We know they're a lot more money, but they're IBM, I mean, it's an expert, you got to bring that, forth, right? And so when we're positioned as an expert, people don't question, because people will be, well, how you do that? Well, you sell on value, right? I mean, that's what it is. It's a value-based proposition. And I would explain it this way, Mario. I would say, look, let's say, and this was a real life story that happened. Like, as I got a little older, my eyes started getting a little wonky, right? So they were like little defocus here and there. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to wear contacts. I'm going to go check out this LASIK surgery thing. So I asked my doctor, I said, hey, who do you know that does this? And she literally said this. She said, well, I know two people. One, he just got out of medical school. He's really good. He's done few procedures. Everything's gone fine. And then she said, and then I know another guy, he's done almost 3,000 procedures. Everything's gone fine, but he's a fair bit more money than the first guy. And who do you want? Well, I was like, give me the guy who done 3,000 procedures. These are my eyes, right? I'm not I don't want some guy oops, sorry, you're my first mistake, right? I mean, so, and I did, and I went and got the surgery, and it was a one-call close. I went to the office. They said, hey, it's going to be, X thousands of dollars. I'm like, okay, when can we do it? Right. So, because a lot of people, when we are doing referrals, they're looking for the power of the leverage from that referral. They already trust Mario in this case. You're already a like peer-to-peer mind, and you're solving a problem for them. They already just had a problem, jumping through hoops and losing time, money, energy, making bad decisions that turned out to be, a pain point for them. Here you're solving a problem. There's the value. They don't even have to think about it. They know this person's going to come in and do this. So of course it's going to close faster. And why average salespeople don't, or people selling, whether it's, you're the owner of the company and you're a solo entrepreneur, or you're a CEO of another company, they don't extend through referrals always boggled my mind. And I realized it's because they have a passive system for referrals versus an active system for referrals and gaining business, unlike the person who taught you how to do it.
Very, very good point. Love that. Let's quickly define, though. We keep talking about this 1% earner. Let's define 1% earner and what that really means.
Okay, so there's a couple of ways of defining. I'll first say it, I love the hat, right? San Francisco, right? So I'll kind of use a football analogy. Jimmy Garoppolo, Bill Belichick, Tom Brady. So those of you who don't know, maybe Bill Belichick, he was still is the head coach of the New England Patriots, right? Brady and he were together. Well, Garoppolo was on the Patriots originally before they went to San Francisco. I would say Jimmy Garoppolo is a top producer. He's got consistent action. He's striving to be at the top. I would say Bill Belichick would be your overachiever. He's going to constantly try to win Super Bowls no matter what. Tom Brady's your 1%er. Tom Brady can go from team to team to team to team. It does not matter. He's constantly was winning. So he had skill sets that he had developed that Jimmy Garoppolo, I love Jimmy Garoppolo, don't get me wrong, just didn't have those skill sets. He didn't have that little extra, right? So a top 1% earner is really defined in my world as what geographic region do you live in and who's making 1% in that geographic region. So for example, if we went to West Virginia, that's probably going to be somewhere around $360,000 a year. If you're making 360 grand a year in West Virginia, you're going to be in the top 1% of earners. Now, if you go to, I don't know, Connecticut, right? That's going to be about 970,000 a year. You go to California, it's going to be high. You go to New York City, it's going to be high. You go to Arkansas, it's going to be lower, right? So a 1% earner is defined in my world by geographic region. If you go to Great Britain, it's about 15,000 British pounds per month, puts you into the top 1%. So you can go anywhere in the world, Poland, South Africa, whatever. They all have their currency. You can also define a top 1% earner by who makes top 1% in that specific industry. So that's really how I define it on my end, is the region, because I don't really like the industry per se thing, because usually it's lower than the actual region. And so we're trying to, bring them up into that. But different people have different definitions of it, but that's my definition of it.
Roger that. Well, thinking about the 1% earner compared to the average salesperson, what are some of the activities that a 1% earner does differently? And I know we talked about a couple of them, and I even mentioned what me and Greg did, or Greg and I did, when we were selling together as a junior and as a senior account executive. So talk a little bit about, what are the activities that are different by the 1% earner?
Yeah. So the 1% earner, again, they're going to try to regenerate. So they don't look at a sale as it's one and done. They look at a sale as a beginning, and they're going to develop that relationship to regenerate new sales over and over, because that's a form of leverage. So everything a 1% earner does is designed to give them specific leverage. So in the case of the gentleman who taught you, he used you as part of the leverage, right? Because, I remember when I was selling telecommunications, I looked and I said, okay, what are the leverage points that I can employ? So we had a direct sales team, whether it was account executives, major account executives, enterprise reps. So we had our direct, we had an indirect sales team, which is agents. So agents are independent sellers who get a percentage of a sale. So they will go out and bring business. So those two. And what I looked at one time is I said, geez, these agents, they have a lot of clientele. Like we might go to somebody who sold phone systems, for example, as an agent and say, hey, be an agent for our particular company. We sell dial tone and data and all that stuff. We're not competing with you, but we can help you and you can help us, right? So the agents would then do that. I got the idea. I said, well, why don't I create the leverage of an agency as a direct rep? And this was not done before. I said, what if I go take these agents, because there's a part of this agent world I know by talking to them, because I researched it, that they don't want to do the sale by themselves and be the salesperson. They want a salesperson helping them, and they will take a less percentage. So we created this direct agency off this model. And this is a form of leverage. How leveraged is it? Well, think about this. In those days, you might have somebody who was working on people's phone systems for 30 years. And anything that went wrong with phones, they called that phone guy first. That was it, or gal. That was it. That was like the trusted resources. So I would go make a relationship with them, and I would say, hey guys, listen, you want to sell new phone systems? They go, yeah. I said, well, if you bring me into your clientele, I will find savings for them. Tell me what you need for the lease payment. And so let's say the lease payment was $800. I'd find $1,200 a month in their phone bill. We'd rip down the phone bill, and we'd make a deal with the customer to then sell a phone system. So they were getting new phone systems. Now, how effective was this? I had 62 incoming calls a day for referrals coming into my line. I want people to get this. These are real numbers, and it wasn't every day, but on average, it was 62 incoming calls. I measured it over a couple month period. It got so much to a point, Mario, where I couldn't even handle the business that I hired one assistant. I could not get enough out of that one assistant, so I hired another assistant. So just as he was having you chase and follow up on things, my assistants were doing those, and I was working with the buyers. And in some months, many months, I was out selling not only the whole team of 9 that I was working with combined, but 3 or 4 regions in some months. So, you were talking about hitting the clubs and the diamond clubs and all that stuff. I was consistently in there every single month, with the CEO of this company that, while I was there, grew up to 300 and something million. He would pick up the phone and call me. Hey, what are you thinking? What's going on? Right. And I thought that really to be weird. But the reality is, this is what 1% earners do. The main trait they do is consistency, always looking for leverage points, always looking how to create more without doing more. And it's a mind structure issue. The second thing that they do every single day, and I still do this to today, I listen to something like Oprah Winfrey, Jordan Peterson, something, because I know that I'm going to get challenged today, and I've got to prepare myself every single day to go into the world that I go into, because it's not all, whatever, roses and teacups, right? So we prepare ourselves to not to be so reactive. And that's what a 1% earner will do, because when objections come up, a 1% earner doesn't get rattled. They start asking questions like, wonder why this person's saying this. Let me get curious, not confrontational. Let me not overcome this. Let me help this person resolve this. Where a top producer, or even, an average producer, they're going to go, oh, objection. I got to quash that right now because that's going to stop my sale. Right. So we're preparing our mind on a regular basis, and we're looking for leverage points, and we're creating consistency, processes, and systems through the whole thing to create more leverage. Is that answering what you asked, Mary?
Yes, 100%. And so I guess the question then is that many sales leaders wonder is can you hire these 1% earners into a company? Because if they're a 1% earner, that means they should be being taken care of really, really well by the sales organization. So can you even hire these folks away?
Yes, because a lot of sales organizations aren't treating them the way they need to be treated. So if for those of the people who are going, man, I want to hire these people, right? My first question out of the gate is, are you a 1% company? In other words, think about it. You're not going to bring Tom Brady into a team where Tom Brady doesn't have the support system that he needs. Right now, Tom's a little older now. Tom, God bless you, love you, you know what I mean? But I mean, he proved himself, right? But think about Tom in his heyday when he was back with, I don't know, the New England Patriots, right? And if his contract was coming up, how many teams would have been after Tom Brady? Like, like every team in the league, right? So those type of people are always going to be in demand. So a company needs to set up for a 1% earner, and that company setting up for that 1% earner, the first thing I would ask them is, these people are going to come in and they're going to expect a system of support and leverage. And do you have it? Now, if you don't have it, it's okay as long as you explain it to these people. Hey, we're a startup atmosphere. This is what we have. This is what we don't have. Because the 1% earner will go, okay, I'll help create this. I'll innovate. I'll bring things to the table. But what they won't do is they won't stay in an environment if they were misled. In fact, when you look at the turnover rate, which I do, Mario, of these people, a little over 70% flush out within the first 2 months of organizations. And the number one reason that they say they flushed out was the job was misrepresented to them. So we've got to set up to actually handle a 1% earner. And, they don't need to be coddled. They don't need to be, overloved. What they need is they need the fact that they're going to create leverage, and they're going to demand that environment allows them to create the leverage. And hopefully that leverage is already built into that environment. So you're not going to take an operations team. Like I remember I worked for a company and I sold 5 huge deals. Well, I sold 7. Back then they used faxes to produce all of this stuff. Somebody knocked 5 of my deals behind the fax machine. And 6 weeks later, my clients are calling me going, I haven't heard any installs or anything going on or whatever. And I looked into this and we realized, oh, these deals got knocked out. So what happened? Well, you know what? A couple of these companies like, I can't wait any longer. They went to competitors. What did I do? You fix this problem or I'm gone. I've got 7 people asking me right now to come work for me, right? And I don't mean to sound arrogant, but this is what these people think like and what they will do, because they are there to get a goal that they're looking for. Now that's personal, usually to that individual. It could be family. It could be, I don't know, they want to buy a bigger home. They want to have more children, whatever. they're not going to wait. And the other thing the company must know is it's all about their personal performance to them. It's not necessarily about the personal performance of the company. So the company has to make room for them because they're a little bit of a maverick, but they will come into conformist, in the process, as long as the process is there. If not, they're going to make it up.
I don't know if I would say they're a little bit of a maverick. Most of us who have been in that spot, we are a maverick, and you're usually making waves, and most of it is around why won't you follow this company process? And it's because it doesn't help me personally, and I'm not going to make me more. It's not going to make me more money. Therefore, I don't care.
Yep.
And I cannot tell you how many times I've had those conversations, which is, why am I going to do this? This is not helping me to sell more. This is helping you. I'll tell you what you need to know. All you know is that I'm a top earner and I'm going to make you money. That's it, right? Oh, we are the nightmare for the administration part of sales management. That's for sure.
That can happen, especially if it's not set up appropriately. And you know as well as I do, we'll innovate, right? We'll innovate no matter what. So it's not like the water hits the dam and it goes, oop, can't go over it. We're gonna go, hey, how do we drill a little hole in this weak spot? we're gonna expose that weak spot and we're gonna go right through it. Or we'll dig a trench around it. We don't care. We're just going to do that. That's why we can be a bit of a little bit of a brush with human resources here and there, or whatever, as long as it's not set up that way. But if it's set up that way to handle, you're not going to take a thoroughbred horse, stick them in the gate, right? And they're all kicking to get out of the gate because they want to run. You're not going to leave them in the gate. They're going to find a way out. They'll kick the gate open. They'll jump over the gate. They'll do whatever, because that's what they do. So please understand, those of you who are looking to hire these people, they will bring innovation and they will bring massive amounts of revenue and profitability to your company. But we got to keep them in the racetrack in their own lane. Otherwise, they're going to run into everybody else's lane because it's shorter on the left to get around the corner. That's how we think.
Exactly right. I can't tell you how many times I would have the brush with HR.
I had one once with sales engineering.
Yes, me too. That was same exact issue.
I literally went out and sold a product set that didn't exist, but I knew we could do it technologically. So there was one customer was asking for this. And I was like, wow, this will save this person a lot of money and it'll improve their efficiency I was in the tech sector at that point. And so I went out and I said, well, we could do this. And they said, well, geez, that's interesting. It will save me, thousands of dollars a month. I said, yeah. And they go, well, what do you call it? I said, tie lines. Right. And they said, well, that's pretty cool. And they said, well, I'll take it. So I wrote it up and I had a bunch of appointments, and so I brought back about, I think it was 4 or 5 orders with these tie lines. And I sold them to massive size companies, to like really brand name companies. And I remember being in my cubicle in my desk and I heard my name being screamed, and then a lot of expletives after my name came out. And I knew what was coming because it was Peter Weston, who was the head of the sales engineering department. And I hear him walking down the hallway. And I'm laughing, Mario, because I know what's coming, right? And so as soon as he gets to my desk, he goes, what the? And he throws the paperwork on my desk. What is this? I said, I call them tie lines. He goes, we don't have a product set for this. I said, can we technologically do it? He goes, yeah, we can. I said, well, then we have them now. He goes, no way. So then he goes to my boss and he's like screaming at my boss. And my boss, this goes through the whole organization. The CEO I was telling you about, he gives me a call. And he goes, what did you do?
I've heard that question. I can't even tell you. What did you do?
But see, here's the thing, right? They then made it a product set for the company. And we sold millions and millions of dollars of this product set in the next 12 months coming. I don't know, over time, probably tens of millions of dollars, right? And we were out competing on competitors. And all the CEO asked me, because he was just like laughing and shaking his head, all he asked me was, before I pull a stunt like this again, please give him a call. That's all he asked me. So that's what a 1% earner will do. They will make it up and create it if it doesn't exist. And so yeah, they can be a bit of a handful, but when we have an organization, and I got to say, Chet Holmes, who wrote the book The Ultimate Sales Machine, when I worked with Chet made space for all of these one percenters and these mavericks, and it worked amazingly well. And that's where we grew so fast, right? Because Chet was just like, I got it. He was one himself. He stepped back, provided the marketing, let people do what they did, provided the system and the guidance along the path, put in the right help to assist and coach. And, I mean, we grew, ninefold within a period of, several years.
I love the stories. Brings back such great memories of being inside that room. And then, my boss saying, if you would just ask, just one time, just please ask before you go do it. And we will avoid all of this drama and everybody being upset at you. And I would always say, I understand. I know. I'm so sorry. But hey, the good news is we're over quota. We sold the deal. And they're like, that's not the point. And I'm like, it is for me.
So I know the longest running CEO. He's just retired, of Silicon Valley. And before they had chips, he actually sold one. He actually sold the computer, of how the silicon wafers and things like that. And I asked him, how did you do this? He's like, well, it didn't exist. But he said, I knew they could do it technologically. I knew they could build it. And he said, I was trying to get into this company over and over and over and over and over again. And they kept just pushing me off and pushing me off. And I knew I could help them. So he said, I had tried I think he told me 11 times to get into this company, and they just were pushing him off. And so he said, I walked in the office one day, and I walked up to the executive secretary at that time. That's what they were called, executive assistants today. And I asked for the man, and she said, well, he's kind of in a meeting. He's busy. And she said, well, who are you? And he said, tell him it's his brother. So the guy, she goes, oh, okay. So the guy comes out of the office, out of the meeting, and he says to this man, what the heck? You are not my brother. How dare you? And he said, well, sir, I'm a kind of a religious guy, and I feel that God looks at us all as brothers in the equal eyes of the Lord, of God. So we are brothers in a lot of ways. Now, that takes really strong confidence level. I mean, that's right. And so
we call that pretty ballsy.
But the gentleman looked at him, and what are you going to say? The guy, it's either like, you no good rat, right? Get out of here. But the guy said, you know what? If you have that much confidence, I'll give you the meeting. And he did the meeting, and he sold that chip, that silicon process in there on that company. And he told me the same thing happened, Mario, that happened to you and happened to me. He wrote back, he wrote the order, and the sales engineers went ballistic. But it's one of the reasons we have all the computers and stuff we have today, right? So they are not afraid to push the limit. They're not afraid to, make things happen, innovate. And look, a whole industry was created off this, right?
Yeah, for sure. Man, this has been a fabulous conversation. We're a little over time here. So first off, if someone wants to connect with you, Doug, what's the best way? Is it LinkedIn, Twitter, email? You tell us.
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is Doug Brown 123. So that one's fairly easy to remember. They can shoot me an email directly at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. Or you matter, YOUMATTER at ceosalesstrategies.com. Those are the two best ways to get a hold of me. Mario, I had a question for you. I don't know if I can do this for your listeners or not. I'm just in the process of putting some finishing touches on it's going to be an ebook right now that we are going to sell, but it's on how to be a nonstop 1% earner. It's kind of the psychology and philosophy behind that. I'd be happy to give it away to your listeners for you if that's okay with you.
You can only do that if you give me a copy of it.
I will be deal.
Deal sold.
Deal. We just made a sale. Everybody get that. So if they want to send an email to YouMatter, YOUMATTER at ceosalesstrategies.com, and just put in, Mario, give me my book. Then we'll know it came from you, and we'll do that, and we won't try to sell the book at that point. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So anybody who wants to have the ebook, send an email to You Matters.
Yeah, YouMatter, YOUMATTER, because you do matter to us, right?
Yeah, at ceosalesstrategies.com, and then put in the subject line, Mario sent me, right? Or the Modern Selling Podcast, or something that triggers Doug and his team to know that you heard it and you heard the offer on the Modern Selling Podcast. And hey, make sure when you reach out to Doug C. Brown on LinkedIn with CEO Sales Strategies, make sure you please send a connection request message, personalized. Doug, I heard you on the Modern Selling Podcast, and all the stories. Fantastic conversation. I got one more question for you, Doug, and that is all-time favorite movie. What is it?
Oh, that one's tough because I'm a movie buff, but it's equal, but Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner and Rocky. Sylvester Stallone. Yeah, I love that movie. I've watched that movie. I don't know. And I guess the third one that's equal would be Tom Hanks and oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the movie. Give me the Tom Hanks.
Philadelphia?
No. The one where's the
one when he turns into a little kid.
No. Oh, that one I love. Big. No, he was in the military. Oh my gosh, the ping pong guy.
Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump. Yeah. So I've watched those three movies. I don't know. This sounds crazy, but probably 14 or 15 times each, because they all have different messages in it. Forrest Gump, be true to yourself. Rocky. You can be the underdog and still make it. And, Field of Dreams, have faith enough to build it, and, good things happen.
I love it. Fantastic. Well, Doug, thank you so much for being on the show. And all of you listening in right now, hey, don't turn that dial quite yet. Listen to this last message. Thanks for listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Please do me a huge favor and give the Modern Selling Podcast a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Oh, and don't forget, if you'd like to save 20 hours or more in a month and increase your productivity, go right now and download Fly Message, that's flymsg.io, for free. It's your free text expander and personal writing assistant. Hey, thanks for listening in, and until the next episode, good selling.